If you've ever wondered what is the most common gun used in crimes today in the United States, that's what I'm going to talk about today as I give you the 7 most traced guns according to the ATF. Now, I'm not only going to have common calibers of guns that are stolen, but specific manufacturers, and I think y'all might be surprised as to what the #1 gun is. I know I was, and so what I thought would be cool is if you leave your guess right now before the video even starts, what do you think the most common gun brand is that is stolen and used in crimes in the United States today? Go ahead and leave those guesses down below. Of course, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join me on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks. Let's go and get into it. Now, I did want to state really quick, if the background or my channel in general does not tell you who I am, really quickly, I am pro Second Amendment, pro gun down to the core. There is not a single anti-gun cell in my body, so I do not come at this video trying to condemn any of these manufacturers, because to me that's kind of silly. It's like blaming Chevy for drunk driving, and yes, I will continue to use that exact example because it's not the tool we blame, it should be the people. I just thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about, and that's my only angle that I'm coming at. Let's go and get into it. Now, one of the first pistols that I actually want to start with here is by HS Product. Interesting that the ATF actually lists them like this instead of Springfield Armory, but I guess that makes sense because HS Product is actually the one that imports all of their pistols, and of course they have a collaboration with Springfield Armory, and they have since the early 2000s. Now, HS Product has been around for like 30 years. They've been making guns since the 90s, and the HS 2000 is like their claim to fame. And that pistol, I want to say, came out in 1999. And then, of course, in like 2001, 2002, Springfield Armory actually approached them, and so they kind of collaborated. But when you look at the guns sold by HS Product in Croatia and other parts of Europe, I assume, they look just like your XDM, your XDSs, all of those guns. They are basically the same. I don't know that this one surprises me, I guess, too much. Springfield Armory is a huge company here in the US, and of course their prices are fairly reasonable. I mean, you can get some expensive guns from them, of course. And I always kind of look at expense and I relate that with crime, but I guess after this video, I'm going to start looking at things differently. But Springfield Armory definitely made the list as one of the most stolen pistols used in crimes in the United States. Now, you may be wondering, why do I keep saying stolen? Well, over 50% of guns used in crimes are stolen. Now, I actually thought this would be a cool video idea as well, talking about things gun owners need to know about stolen guns, but that's why I keep saying stolen, because they are, the majority of the time, they are stolen guns. Now, the next gun that I want to talk about was a surprise at first, but I guess it shouldn't be, and that is the .22 long rifle. Now, when you look at the manufacturers that are most attached to the .22, funny enough, it's actually Marlin and Ruger. Now, Marlin has been acquired a couple of times here in the 21st century, and the most recent one is by Ruger in 2020, and they started, of course, producing guns under the Marlin name. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting that #1 and 2 are basically both the same company. Now, you may be asking, what is the timeline for this study? And this study is like 55 pages long. It's insane. They go through all kinds of details and stuff. But what we're focused on here is 2017 to 2021. And so, yeah, Marlin and Ruger, .22. So I would guess, you know, obviously your 1022, your Model 60s, you know, and a lot of people have these guns. I mean, these are guns that are passed down through generations. Marlin's been around since the 1870s, you know, and they competed with Winchester, you know, forever. They were the #1 competitor. Actually, they made the 1895 Browning machine gun during World War I. I didn't know that until I did a little bit more research on them for this video, and I thought that was pretty cool. And they actually had the Marlin gun, which was used in aircraft at the time. But it wasn't until the 80s and 90s when Marlin actually started to surpass Winchester in sales. And so they have been the #1 manufacturer of lever guns ever since. Now this next one probably comes to no surprise, especially those of you that know revolvers, but the most commonly traced revolver caliber is in .38, and the most commonly traced manufacturer is Smith & Wesson. And Smith & Wesson has dominated, absolutely dominated the revolver space now for, since the mid 1800s. They came out with the first patent for the volcanic rifle, and then of course that dissolved and came into the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, and they went on to make revolvers. And so ever since, they've made some of the highest quality, if not the highest quality, revolvers out there. They actually made 1 million 38s, the M&P model back then, for the US military during World War II. Now, my opinion is the more guns in lawful gun owners' hands, the better. But one thing that this whole study, taught me is not only are the majority of guns that are used in crimes stolen, so obviously people are breaking the law, it's seemingly never law-abiding gun owners actually. We just tend to, take the hit and all the bumps and the bruises and all of the rigmarole that we have to go through, and permission to some extent to own guns. But one thing I do want to say that is a fault of gun owners, and something that I definitely want to bring up here, is guns that are stolen out of vehicles. That is on the rise. And so that is one way that we can keep from actually arming some of these criminals and stuff. Just leaving your car unlocked, okay? So if you have Ring and you have that app, you can see like what's going on in your neighborhood. And I mean, almost always when you see this, it's not criminals breaking glass, it's simply them opening the door. So this is something I want to elaborate on further, but I just wanted to throw it in there. Like, this is not a gun manufacturer issue. This is a criminality issue. And again, I'll expand more on that. But that is one way that we can help to not arm some of these criminals. Just take your gun out of your car or get a lockbox that is sturdy, that you can lock that thing. It's bolted on the inside of the console, so you know nobody is getting to your firearm. And that segments me into my next gun we're going to talk about here perfectly, which is the Sky 9mm. Now, I kind of got myself out of order here, so just remember that Sky is one of the least stolen guns out there, but this one really makes sense to me. It's a cheap firearm. I'm sure a lot of people use it as a truck gun, something they can beat up. They don't really care about. They just want it to work in case somebody were to attack them or their families. So I get that, and truck guns are used a lot, and I don't have a problem with that at all, just as long as they're locked up. So this is one of those cheap guns that you would kind of expect would be stolen a lot, just simply based on the fact that they are so inexpensive. Now again, this gun doesn't really surprise me, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea and think that, you have to have high-end guns in order to use them for self-defense, because that's not the case at all. But I will not recommend Sky just from my personal experience, because I know there's some manufacturers and other guns out there that you can get that are more reliable for about the same money, maybe 20 or 30 bucks more, that and that's the biggest thing, is trusting your firearm. And I just unfortunately don't trust them. So, if criminals were bright enough, if they actually saw the name on the side of the slide when they went to go steal it, maybe they would leave that gun alone. But hey, hopefully those guns don't work at all if they do end up getting stolen. So I think it's pretty obvious I'm not a fan of these guns, but it really does not surprise me. This is like your typical kind of truck gun, if you will. Now we go back to America's largest gun manufacturer, who is Ruger. And so Ruger is one of those companies, man, that I really appreciate what they do, because very similar to Smith & Wesson, they actually make firearms that are affordable for the public and typically really reliable. And so that is the best combination right there. And like I said, I am not against budget guns, and Ruger makes some of the best. But again, unfortunately, some people see these as truck guns. So like, you know, your Ruger American, your Security 9, your EC9S, LC9S, all those kind of guns, you know, that now some of them being carry guns too now. So I'm not going to sit here and assume that everybody that owns a Ruger just keeps it as a truck gun. I mean, we're talking carry guns, and basically the way the ATF listed it is just Ruger 9mm pistols. So we got to assume that some of those may be truck guns, some of them may be concealed carry guns, whatever the case may be. Rugers are one of the more traced firearms, unfortunately, to crimes. Now, believe it or not, even though they are the largest manufacturer in the United States total guns, they actually only came about in 1949, and I say only because, you know, a lot of these manufacturers have been around since the mid 1800s, so they're relatively new, but they've, you know, just through several decades now, just been super reliable and made guns that a lot of people can afford. Now, I actually made a video talking about the Ruger Standard. I think it's still in members only. Actually, I know it's still in members only, but it is a really pretty fascinating story about how the Ruger Standard came apart and some ties actually to Germany in World War II. So anyways, I found some pretty cool stuff there. If you want to check that out, it's in the members only section. But again, Ruger, awesome company. One of those that I would recommend compared to the Sky because they are super reliable and affordable. And now we circle back to Smith & Wesson. So the Smith & Wesson 9mm handgun, unfortunately, is traced back in crimes quite a bit. And again, just like Ruger, they make guns that are affordable, right? You have the SD series, which is super affordable. They actually have a new SD series out there. I forget the nomenclature on that one, but definitely one that I look forward to getting and reviewing and seeing how it does, right? And so you obviously have the M&P and all of the iterations of that. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that the Shield Plus is probably my favorite carry gun and has been for a couple of years now. And so I really believe in Smith & Wesson. I love what they do, and they're not perfect by any means, but they do a really good job. And honestly, I didn't realize how close Smith & Wesson was to actually closing in the early 2000s. They had a lot of boycotts against them from the gun community for things that they were trying to do to save their company and working with Bill Clinton in the process. At one point, their shares were down to 19 cents per share. And so that was kind of interesting. You know, I've done a lot of older research on Smith & Wesson, but none of like really modern stuff. But it's obvious that they've turned the tide since. I just thought it was kind of crazy. They dropped so low. The gun community, we, when it comes to, you know, going against gun rights as a gun company, it's something that a lot of companies have learned, man. You do not do that because our rights are not up for sale, and that is one of the most important things. And fortunately, like I said, Smith & Wesson has been for a long time one of the greatest American gun companies out there, and a company I personally love a lot of what they do because, again, we get reliable firearms and, you know, for the most part, the pricing is really good. Of course, they have some higher end guns too, but they kind of have a budget range, mid, and some higher tier firearms. So no matter what your budget is, Smith & Wesson is one of those fantastic American companies. Unfortunately, their guns get stolen a lot. So I think, again, or get traced a lot to crimes. I keep mentioning stolen because it's just one of the facts behind all of this stuff. But again, it's just something that we can do as gun owners. And look, I'm not perfect. There's been times, and I promise you, there has been times where it's like 12 o'clock, you know, in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I remembered I had to take my gun off for something, and I left it in my truck, and I will walk out there, you know, freaking boxers, no shirt on, grab it really quick, and come back inside. So I'm not perfect, man. It's easy to forget these things, but it's something that we all can be responsible for. And like I said, 99% of gun owners, 100% of gun owners I've ever talked to, but I would say 99% of gun owners do not want to arm criminals because we don't break the law, and we sure as hell don't want somebody else breaking the law or hurting, or worse, unaliving somebody, especially with our firearm. You know, and before I talk about the most stolen gun out there, I do want to mention High Point. I thought for sure this gun would show up on the list of most traced firearms. And again, that's what I was talking about. You know, typically, you know, and I don't know if you guys do this or not, and sometimes it's not correct to do this, but you kind of correlate some of the things that High Point comes out with, like, you know, their freaking whatever gun that has $100 bills all over it, you know, and it's sold for $100 or 150 bucks. When I see that, it really does not. I think it's kind of tacky. Okay, the pricing is one of those things that I'm kind of a stickler on, because having affordable options for people that truly cannot afford a $500 or $600 gun not the issue. Just some of the promotional stuff and some of the, I guess, some of the guns that High Point makes, along with the cheap pricing, I just correlate them with being a lower tier firearm manufacturer. But they didn't make the list anywhere. And because we know that most guns are actually stolen from law-abiding gun owners, then that's just saying a lot. The most law-abiding gun owners that know anything about guns are not carrying around High Points. And again, don't get the wrong impression, man. If you cannot afford these, I've done plenty of budget type of pistols for people that need that. And I think there's a lot of great, good budget guns out there, but High Point did not make the list here. And so maybe that's more of a positive thing when we look at gun owners, because they just know, like, hey, you know, yeah, I could deal with Sky, but I'm not buying a High Point. Now, one of the budget manufacturers that did make the list, though, is Taurus. Now, since the G2C, really, Taurus has kind of impressed me. Now, I did a review recently on the GX4 XL. There was a recall that came out. I tried to get more information on it. I couldn't get it from Taurus, but regardless, I still have to say, and neither one of my guns were affected, by the way, but since the G2C, the G3, the GX4, the GX4 XL specifically, or especially I should say, they've been great guns. Now, Taurus is one of those manufacturers when it comes to the budget side that I will recommend, just because of how much good luck I've had from them over the past, I don't know, 5 years now at this point. But they weren't always known for making high quality semi-autos by any means. It's kind of like the epitome of a truck gun. I've heard countless people say, you know, a Taurus G3, perfect truck gun. Beat it up, don't really care about it, whatever, but if you need it, it's there. Now, one thing I found that was interesting is that in 1981, Beretta had finished their contracts for the Brazilian military, and Taurus swooped in afterwards and bought the manufacturing plant, the tooling, the designs, everything, and obviously, you know, created their version of the Beretta 91. And so that's how that came about. They also kind of did the same thing, even though they acquired the rights to Rossi revolvers in the mid 90s. But they've been around since 1924. You know, I think since the 50s, they kind of introduced revolvers into the U.S. market. And at some point, they were tied with Smith & Wesson. Those ties were severed. It didn't take long to sever those ties either. So they have a pretty storied history. But I would say that the revolvers have pretty much been known for being fairly reliable. Semi-autos over the past few years have also been known for being super reliable and affordable at the same time. And the most commonly traced gun back to crimes is Glock. Gaston Glock, with the 17th patent, created the Glock 17. And this gun, it has revolutionized what a striker-fired polymer frame pistol can be, and every manufacturer since has copied this design to some extent. It has been wildly successful, and even though I've been critical of the things that Glock does, I have also always said how much I respect them for what they've done for concealed carry, striker fire guns specifically. I mean, they really were pioneers in this whole thing in bringing it to the forefront of, you know, concealed carry and all the pistols that we know today, all the polymer wonders. You know, it's that Glock design that started it all. It's kind of funny when you think about it back then, because people were like, oh my God, this is a plastic gun. They're going to be able to get it through security and all this kind of stuff, not realizing that, okay, yeah, the blower is polymer, but there's still, metal in the magazines. As far as like the frame, there's like, there's metal in the lower. Obviously, the slide is metal. So, anyways, it's kind of funny. People hear about these plastic guns back then, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is gonna be nuts." It's gonna be the Wild West. But anyways, we know that it did not turn out like that because the critical parts of the gun are still metal. And when you think about this, and I'm not gonna sit here and blame music 100% for this. But I do want to mention that Glock is used in the majority of rap songs out there. You will hear Glock, and maybe it's just because it's easy to associate Glock with just any handgun out there. It's also easy to rhyme something with Glock as opposed to, I don't know, Beretta or Colt or Smith & Wesson, you know what I mean? Like, even though I've heard Beretta actually quite a few times in rap music as well. But the whole point I want to say about that is that unfortunately, there are a lot of people that listen to especially gangster rap. They hear about the Glock 40, and that's something that they may potentially gravitate to. Now, that doesn't mean that, because again, we know that most of these guns are stolen, so I don't think it really matters like so much as to what people are listening to, because it could be any gun in that vehicle that they just stole it out of, because vehicles again are where the majority of these crimes happen. But it could be any gun in there. But Glock is one of the most popular, along with Smith & Wesson, as far as one of the most popular carried guns in the United States. But we can't forget that not every single gun that is traced back to a crime, not every single one of them is stolen, right? There are some people that will do straw purchases, obviously breaking the law again, and they want that Glock because maybe they hear it in a rap song and that's something that they aspire to do. Now, that to me goes back to childhood, two parents in the household, all that kind of stuff, which we will definitely save for another day. I'm not going to sit here and get into that right now, but I just wanted to bring it up because it is interesting that it's the most commonly traced pistol to crimes, and it's the most common gun that's used in gangster rap. Again, I'm not going to sit here and blame rappers who are talking about their experience. It's just unfortunate that sometimes, especially younger people, will listen to that, and if they don't have good direction, they may gravitate towards that. So it's just one of those things. I wanted to not bring it up as a correlation, like, oh, gangster rappers are the reason that Glocks are the most stolen or the most trace guns to crimes. But I just did want to draw a little bit of comparison there. But again, that's like blaming Chevy for drunk driving. It is the people and their choices. And again, a lot of this does start at childhood. So we can actually keep a lot of the guns out of people's hands just by simply locking our vehicles. First of all, taking our guns out of our vehicles if we don't have a secure place to keep them. So it's just one of those things, man. But criminals are going to break the law. We know that, and good guys with guns are what we need more of. So there you go. There's my opinion. Thank you guys for watching. And of course, I want to hear your opinion about all of this down in the comments below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. And as always, hold 'em down.